Let me start the class out. So, hello everyone. How are you all doing? Pretty good? Good. So, today we will continue and our target is to finish this app. So that's what we will aim for. And on today's agenda, there are a couple of other things. You will get another quiz today. And I will speak briefly about your midterm exam, which is right after the reading week. So I will tell you things about it, like how to prepare or what you can expect on it, what format, etc. So we'll do that towards the end of the class. What I want to start off by sharing with you is another quote. We have, from the beginning, we said that we are going to follow the approach of learning by doing. So to learn something, if you do it, you have a better chance of actually absorbing it. And a lot of people you'll find have, shared their experience on this through their writings or other ways. And this one here is by an English writer named Anthony Trollope. He lived in the 19th century, 200 years or so ago. And he said that there is no royal road to learning, no shortcut to the acquirement of any art. So basically, if you want to become good at something, even developing apps for the iPhone, the only way to become an expert, acquire that art and that knowledge, is by actually doing it over and over again. There's no shortcut. There's nothing like, okay, I can read a book and I'll become an expert. Ain't gonna happen. So that said, let's rewind a bit and just take an overview of what we have done so far in this app. So this was our target. We started with the Hello World type of app. Then we did the calculator, and now we are doing this multi-view app, which is basically using a welcome screen and a table in between, and eventually a game board. So far, what have we done? We did the welcome screen. That's how we started. We added the table view controller. We added some dummy data to it. And we added the blank view to start building the tic-tac-toe game. And along with each view that you were adding, you added the controllers. For example, the table view controller. And with that, the table view cell. And our next stop was the model for the game. How to store what is going on in the game. And you did it. We did it interactively. How you can store the information of any game. So we thought through the game logic, we developed method, data structures to store what is going on in the game, whose turn is it, who won the game, and the functions needed For example, is the game finished, or play the next move, and make changes to the model as that was happening. You laid out the game view, added all the buttons, the view itself would basically listen to all the touches, and then the game controller to link it all together. You did all of this. What we are missing is game data storage. So how to store the game data? That is going to be the main focus of today's lecture, today's class, and we will link that stored information to the table view. So your table view actually shows the real games that you have played. Okay, and this is what we did in the last class. I had the slides to show you, but got so excited about doing it that I never bothered to show you the slides. So let's look at them now. So when we were building the model, we talked about things like how to track the moves played, and that's where we came up with that square contents to store what is in each square. Whose turn is it? Who's going to be playing next? Is it X or an O? And we also predetermined all the winning combinations. We made a list of them, and then we implemented a function called is game finished, which checks if any of those conditions is met. And then when the game is over, we would show it. So this you have already done. You created the game class, the model class, defined these properties and defined the functions. We may have called them slightly different moves, different names, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. To display the game, you added the grid and the buttons. So, and we had a label there. We don't have an image, but we have a label that tells you who won the game or if it was a draw. And all of that happened through the game controller. Basically, it had an outlet to the label that displays the state of the game. It had IB actions. IB action is the what happens when a button is clicked, right? You created one and then you attached it to all the other 8 buttons. So this is what we did. And this last point, ability to reproduce a past game, we will come to this. And this is where we were. Let's run the game and see what's going on. So why don't you all run your apps and just make sure that the games are being played properly, that the game board is behaving. So when the game is over, you want to see X won the game, or if O wins, you want to see O has won the game. Try this. Make sure that all 3 scenarios are covered. You get a message when the game ends in a draw. You get that it ended in a draw. So this. Oh, the game is finished. O won the game. So it's very hard to draw a game if you're playing both X and O. That's how I feel. Anyway, so if all of this is happening, now our job is this game finished, right? We want this game to appear here. Instead of just this dummy 01, 01, we want it to say what happened in the last game, who won it, what time was it played, and maybe display an image along with it, a smiley face or a sad face or something, right? So that's our task. And how are we going to do that? What information do we need to store to be able to populate this table about each game? What information, let's say you finished playing a game and now you're saving the information about it. What is it that you need to save so you can display this? Who won? Who won? Okay. Date. So date, time, what else? For this table, these two things are enough, right? Just need to know who won and when. But if you want to touch one of those and show the game again, what else do you need to do? So you want to show what happened in that game, right? If you go to your game model class, look at the different variables. So we need to store some of these. So whose turn we don't care about. Who won we already said. Date and time when the game happens, we'll ask the system to provide us the current date and time. So it's not declared as a variable, doesn't make sense. What else if you want to reproduce the game out of these? Square content? Yes. So square contents. Okay, this is an array. So square contents, if you remember, it's an array that tells you what is in what square. Snapshot. So that way we can, with square contents, we can show how the game ended, right? But do we have the information about how it was played? Who was the first and where did they place their mark? We don't have that information in square contents. Is there a problem? Yeah. What's happening? Error? Okay, we'll take a look at it in a second. So square content shows you a snapshot, not, it's a picture, it's a photograph, it's not a movie. We want the movie, we want how the game was played. So we need to store that, right? So for example, let's say this is the game board, it started like this, and the first person touched here, right? So which square did that go in? 5. And the next person goes here. That went in square 7, right? And like this, it happens. So whatever numbers may be, whatever, right? If we have this information, we can show those moves one at a time. We don't even need to know whether it was an X or an O, as long as we know what was the starting point. If X started, which is our case, X is always starting, then it alternates between O and X. So all we need is this order. So once we have this order, we can replay the game. We can in fact build commands in there, write code which says, okay, play the first move, it's an X in the 5th square, and then wait for a second. So the whoever is watching, they get to see, okay, what happened step by step. That's what we will do. So we need to store this. What is the data type to store this, the right data type? An array. Array of integers. Just that is enough. So what we will do is we'll declare an array of integers and we will call it. So instead of this here, let me add this. Order of, this is what we will add as a variable. Okay, before we do that, one more question. Once you have the order of moves, do you also need to save the square contents to build the game? Yes. So if you know the order of moves, square contents can be built, right? Yeah. As it's playing, as the computer, you will tell it to play this game, it will build the square content. So we don't need to save it. It's just a snapshot. So what we will do is we'll declare this variable order of moves. And it's an array of integers. We'll declare it as an array of integers of an unknown size. So what Swift or the system will do for us is it will create an array, and as you add elements to it, it will keep on increasing its size. Because we don't know, our game may be over in 6 moves. It may take 7, it may take 8, it may take 9, but it won't go beyond 9. So we'll just declare it without giving a size. And then once you have this, you need to start saving that. This order in which the moves are being played. So where in your model class, where do you think is the right place to save that? To basically not save, but to assign the value to order of moves. So take a look at your class, the model, game model, and see where you know this, you have this information that this move was just played and I need to this, add this integer to the array. Play move. Play move. Exactly. So in the play move, that's all we will do, and we will say order of moves. And since we don't want to, we don't need to get into whether this was the first move, second move, third move, we just add the element. So we'll use this method called append. Oops, wait a second, I chose the wrong one. So dot append, and you will say append new element, this. And what is the value that we are appending this? What's the variable name? So in the play move, it's receiving an argument, right? Which says which square the move was played in. Right? So that's the argument, tag. So when the fifth square is touched, the value of tag is 5. Like that. Any move. So basically, because we are appending it to the array, if there is already one move being played, this will become the second element, the third element, like that, right? So we'll just say tag here. Can you please close the door? Okay. So this gives us the order of moves. Every time a move is played, whether it's in the fifth square, first square, second square, doesn't matter. This function is called with that number as the argument, and we append it to the order of moves. So this gives us the order of moves. Perfect. And we need to save, we will not be saving square contents. We need to save these 3 things. Now imagine that you are playing a game and it has finished, right? And let's say I'm just going to erase this from here so we have less things to look at. So who won? Let's say X won the game. Date and time, whatever is the date and time today is whatever it is, 16th of October and 6 p.m. or whatever the time the game was played, right? Order of moves, we know this variable gives us. So whatever is the order here, we've got the array. Now we want to save it. How are we going to do it? Let's look at the mechanisms available to us. So there are various ways in any kind of environment, operating system, be it or language, you have many ways to save data. For example, you could save the information to a file and read it later on. Or you could have a database, a relational database, an SQL type database where you've got a table with multiple columns and you can save them. There is another method where you can save the object graph, meaning when the game is played, the game model itself contains all the information you need. You could create a function that relies on the system's internals to save that. What we will do is slightly different. We'll use what is called user defaults. User defaults is a mechanism exposed by Swift UI kit to store key value pairs. It's like a dictionary, key value pair. So you define a key and you can save a value to it. And then later on, if you say, okay, get me the value of this key, it will return you that value. That's what we'll do. And user defaults is typically what is used when you are running an app, let's say your email. It saves some information about you somewhere. It needs to save what is your email ID, what is, if it's saving your password, what is your password and stuff like that. When was the last time you downloaded your emails? These become your defaults. Or let's say you're playing a game and the game may have some settings like play the background music or not, or which level were you on when you closed the game last time, stuff like that. All of that goes into your user defaults, and the developer will define keys and store the values. That's what that is. That's what it is designed for. So typically, it's not a very large number of keys you store. In our case, the most appropriate type would be something different, but this is something we need to learn anyway. So this is as good an opportunity as we are going to get to learn how to use user defaults. And what we'll do is we'll save all the information we need about a game using these key value pairs. Okay, so that is what this is. And key value pairs. So we need a key for each of these things that we are going to save. Right? So let's pretend that these are actually the keys. So the game is finished. You tell the system, save this. This is my key. Save this, and that's the value X. Who won the game? X won the game. And similarly for date, time, and order of moves. Okay, one game is saved. Now you play another game. And you tell the system, okay, this is my key, save it. It will override the first time what you say. Because it was already there, so it will override it. So we need a more intelligent way of doing it. So what if you add another variable that is not game dependent, but it is there, which is number of games played, right? And this also you save. And then what happens is, when you play the very first game on the app, you say, okay, I'm going to save it as who won 1, add an integer at the end of all of this. That way you save the first game. After that, you'll be playing the second game. When you're saving it, you will say, okay, instead of 1, now say 2. Then say 3, then say 4. So you have created a unique key for each of these data points for each game. That's our job. So we have to, and then when you're retrieving the information, you're also saving at all the times when a new game is finished. You increment this value, number of games played. So the system also knows how many games have been played. So when it has to retrieve the information, it knows how many to get. Otherwise, how, you keep going 2, 3, 4. What if there is no fourth game? So we can limit that. So this is what we will do. And how are we going to do it? That's a very good question, isn't it? So user defaults, I said we are going to use this class, user defaults, right? If you go to the documentation on Apple's developer site, you will see that it allows you to store key value pairs persistently across launches of your app. How many of you have heard the term persistence when it comes to saving data? Yeah. Yes, so it's available, always available, sort of. So across launches of your app, meaning, see what happens is when the game is being played, that information is in the memory. That's how your square contents, everything, you're able to play the game. But once you quit it and you come back, if it's gone, then it did not persist. So persistence means saving information so that even later on when you launch your app, you open your program again, whatever information you saved is available to you again. That's why you need to save it into a file or a database. Just having it in the memory, the RAM, is not enough. This is yes, exactly. So they save your information and they allow you to continue it. So user defaults. Now it allows us, let's look at the documentation a little more. Let's go down. And various sections. There is one called getting default values. But right now we need to first set. Before we can get, we need to set. We need to save the value before we can retrieve it. So this is how you can save a value. Let's look at an example. Okay. For example, this one. Set, which takes two arguments. The first is an integer. The second is the key, which is a string. So if you want to save an integer, let's say this one, number of games played, then you need to call that function set, where the value type is integer, and then you need to define a key. For which key? We can call it whatever we want. It just needs to be a string. Like that, you can set doubles, floats, and then there is one called any. So what this does is it takes an object of any type and it will save it. So there are some requirements. If you read the documentation more, you will find them out. But for our purpose, this is what will be useful when you want to save the date and time or this array of order of moves. Okay, so what do we need? We need the value that we are going to save and a key. And we have said that we are going to use those as keys. So if we just use strings as keys, there is a problem. It's quite possible that sometimes you may forget to capitalize something or capitalize it when it's not needed. So in order to avoid those problems, we'll use a technique where we'll define constants and give them, we'll give a variable name to each of these keys and then use that variable name in our code. And if we make a typo in the variable name, it doesn't even compile. So then there is no problem. If we make a typo in a static string and we use that, then we don't know what is going to happen. So in order to do that, what we'll do is we'll define some constants, and we can do it right here at this file at the end. This is the game model. Go to the end and we'll use a struct. How many of you are familiar with this word? Struct. Who knows what this is from maybe other languages you have used? Maybe structure. It is a structure. It's a short for a structure. What is its purpose? And why is it there?
Another language structure contains both constructor and destructor.
So what a struct is, see, when we have a native data type, let's say we have an array of integers. This is given to us by Swift. Date time, it could be a date object, right? Maybe if you use JavaScript, JavaScript has a date object. Many languages, all languages have a date object or equivalent. There are strings. These are all native types. But if we wanted to define a type that has all three of these values in it, a new type which is a combination of available types, already available types, that is what a struct would be useful for. So we'll come to that, but structs can also be used. In our case, right now, the struct we create will be just a collection of constants. And this is how we'll do it. We'll even call it constants. So what do we need? We need those three keys. So, and the number of games played. Let's start with that. So I'm going to type something here. Who can explain these 3 lines to me that we've just added? First line, struct constants.
It's a function that holds all the values like integer, float, string, different kind of variables.
Whatever we define inside it, right? So struct constants is just declaring that there is this struct called constants, and inside it is one line which reads static let num games equal to number of games played. So number of games played in double quotes is a string. Right? It's a string, a statically defined string. On the left of the equal to num games, what is num games? It's a variable name. What about the other 2 keywords? Let. What is let doing? Constant. It's something whose value will not be changed. What is static now? It's not the static you get when you walk on the carpet and you touch something and you get a shock. It's not that static.
Maybe it's like we can use the variable only for that function.
So static is a keyword you will see many times. You will see it in Java. See it here. What static means is that this variable, it could be a function also, there are static functions, there are static variables. Then this is a part of the class itself, and the objects, all the objects you create of that class, they share this. So if you define a static variable, if it was not a constant, it was a variable, and then you created 10 instances of constants, and then you assigned a value in each different one, whatever is the last value you assign, all of them will have that, because it's a shared part of it. So basically, when, let's say this is a class, right, and there is a static variable, and it's called V, let's say, right, and then you create an object of this class, and there are some non-static variables x, y, z, and then you create an object of this class. X, Y, and Z can have their own values, but this V is common to all the objects you create. It's the same V in all of them. That is what static means. In the same way, a function can be static. Then that function operates independent of which object it is, on which object you call it. In fact, you have to call it on the class. So this could be useful. For example, you can create a class with a static function that capitalizes a string, just as an example. So you pass it on a string and it returns the whole string capitalized. Like that. That is what static means. So it is a shared object, shared property or function. So let's add some more static for these 3 things. And this is another convention. When you declare constants, if you can follow a convention. In this case, we are using all capitals for the variable name. So when we look at the code, we know this is a constant. That's our convention. Now we have defined these keys as constants. Now we are going to use them. And the way we are going to use them is by creating a function that saves the game. Right? So in the same file, in your game model, scroll to the, again, just above where you declared the constants, before the last closing brackets, which is where the class is ending, declare a function called save game. And watch this. Uh, it is very important in your code that it is readable, and one of the important things in readability is the indentation. And Xcode is actually very smart. It does the indentation for you if you let it. So for example, I have typed function save game, and then I have opened the curly bracket. If I just press enter now, watch what happens. It gave me the closing curly bracket at the right indentation, and it indented one level in. So where I type my code, so you don't have to do that manually. If you just let Xcode do it for you, any IDE will allow you to do that in today's scenario. So this is where we have function save game. So what are the things we want to save?
Date and time.
All of this, and we need this, right? Each game. So to do that, we also need to save number of games played. Basically, the 4 keys we have defined here. So how do we know which game it is, which game number it is? We retrieve the current value and we add 1 to it. So if the number of games played in the past is 3, this is the 4th game. And that whatever that number is after the key, it becomes 4. So we need to retrieve it. And how will we retrieve it? We'll say let this is where we'll start using user defaults. Okay, user defaults, we just talked about static objects. Let me show you, I'll come back to this. User defaults has an object in it which is static. It is a shared defaults object basically, and it's called, the variable name is standard. Returns the shared defaults object. The class variable is another way of saying static variable. So this is shared, so we don't need to instantiate it, we just invoke it. So all we need to do is user defaults dot standard, and this returns the shared object which is of the same type, user defaults dot. Now we are retrieving the number of games played. And to retrieve, if we already know the type, you call the appropriate function. So for example, if we are retrieving an integer, we'll call the function called integer. If we were retrieving a double, we would call a function called double. If we were retrieving a string, we would call the string function. So what we'll do is we'll call the function integer, and for which key? Now instead of typing this text and running the danger of making typos, we will use this variable name, and this is how you'll use it. You will say constants dot. As soon as you say that, it will give you the options. This is number of games, right? So this makes your code bulletproof against typos. If by mistake I didn't remember that this was capital and I tried to type this, it will just complain. It will say there is no such variable. Whereas in here, if we were using the string, we could make any number of typos. We could even call it something else and nobody will tell us. Here Xcode is telling us that's a problem. Oops. So that's why we did this. We declared these constants. Okay, so we've got number of games played. And now we can say game number. This is the game number is equal. So this is the previous number of games played plus 1. So if the previously there were 10 games played, this would become 11. If there were no games played, the first thing will return a 0 because it's not defined. Its default behavior is to return a 0. This will become the first game. So that is our game number. Okay. What is the data type of the first one here? The first. Who won? Who won? String, exactly. Who won? No, like X or O, right? So we need to save a string, and this is how we'll do it. User defaults dot standard. Again, we invoke the shared object dot, and now we need to set a value. So we'll say set. So what are we setting? We are setting a string. Set has, these first half a dozen or so. These are the set functions. You can save an integer, you can save float, double, boolean, URL, any, but there is no string. But any is the parent of everything. So strings can also be saved. So just choose this one, any, and here we'll say who won, and then the key. What is our key? Constants dot who won. Exactly. Constants dot. Okay, is it enough? We need to add the game number to the key. Otherwise, it will keep getting overwritten. If we don't do that, it will just keep saving who won, and we'll always have only one game in the memory, in the storage. So we append the game number. Okay. So what happens when you say plus game number? Did you get an error message? Yes. What does it read?
Binary operators cannot be applied to operand type of string and int.
Exactly. So this is what you should get. Can you add a string and an integer? Not in Swift. In JavaScript, if you did that, it will concatenate. In Swift, you cannot. Swift wants you to be more, there's stronger type safety. So the type of the variables, it wants you to be more specific. So we can only add a string to a string or a number to a number, but not mix that. So we need to create a string out of this. How do we do that? You just initialize a new string from the game number. So basically, you create a string out of it, like this, and there you go. Now your key is constants who won, which is the string on line 86, which says who won, plus the game number, whatever is the current game number. Okay, so this is now done. Let's also save the we have to save these two things: date, time, and order of moves. Date. How do we get a date in Swift? How do you do that in Java or JavaScript? Date object. You create a date object, an object of class date. It's the same in Swift. So what are we setting? We'll just create a date object right here. So we'll save the date. For which key? We'll go with the same scheme, constants dot date time plus the game number. This will save the date. And the last thing we need to save is the order of moves, the order of the moves played on the game, so we can later on reproduce it. Yes.
Whenever we like put or it gives us optional, it just will be given, but now it's not showing me any options.
So just delete the dot and put the dot again. Sometimes maybe there is a typo before that. Okay, so now we need to set the array, and this again we'll use this the second set function. So it saves because there is no function that says you can that has specific definition to save an array. We'll use this, and this will become order of moves, and this again. So as you are typing, see, I started typing constants and it starts giving me all the completion options. So I don't even have to type the whole thing, I can just double click. Same thing, I say a dot, it tells me what my options are. And then we need to add the game number. Right. Game number, okay. So basically this now we have saved the information about the game. Are we done here? Do we need to do anything else in this save game? What's the first line? Number of games played, right? Number of games played. Let's say it had 5 games played before, right? So it will, we have to update the number of games in the storage. Otherwise, it will every time return the same, and in our case, until we update it once, it will always return a 0. So it will always be the first game. It will be like that movie, Groundhog Day. I don't know if any of you have seen it. Always the same day. So that's what we'll do. User defaults dot standard dot set number of games played. Games played, and for which key? Is this enough, or do we need to add the game number to this? See, number of games played is not dependent on which game you are playing, right? Whether it's the 5th game, 10th game, doesn't matter. It is the number of games is going to be one object. You just need to update it. So you don't need. If we add the game number to it, then we have a problem. So it won't retrieve it. So this is enough. So this completes our save game function. And it's telling us, if you look at it, we retrieved the number of games played, we determined the current game's number, and then we saved who won as who won plus the game number. So who won and then whatever the game number is. And the same thing for date, time, and the order of moves. And then we saved actually this is wrong. Why is this wrong? Because num games played was the previous value. The game number is the new value. So what you need to save here is, this is wrong. You need to save game number. So this is the 5th game, 6th game. You have incremented it. So make sure you update it, otherwise your data will not be saved. Now that save game is, those of you who have completed this function, examine your model class and see where you can call this function. What is the right place or places? So we created this function save game. It's of no use unless we call it. And where should we call it? Is game finished? When the game is finished, right? So game is finished under whenever we are returning true, the game is finished. So just before returning true, we can just add the call to save game. Wherever we are returning true, it's in 2 places. Either somebody has won the game or it's a draw. So just above return true, call the save game function. Now it will save your game. Okay, how do we know it's working? Let's add in the save game function at the end, let's add a print statement and call it game saved. So now when we play a game, when the game is finished, we need to see this printed in our debug output. Okay. So it should say when you run and play a game, when it is finished, you should see this message game saved. So now we know that the game is being saved. Our next job is to, when we show that list of games in that table, we need to retrieve all these games that are saved and display them. That's our next task. And that we will do after the break. But before the break,